There is one thing this collection ranks above great riches, explicitly, in a direct comparison, and it is not what most people would guess. Across the 9 episodes before this one, this channel has mostly been about difficulty. Debt that quietly transfers your freedom. Haste that empties the jar. Money that arrives too fast or too early before the capacity to hold it. The empty jar, the hunger underneath the numbers. It has been, largely, a tour of the ways money goes wrong. And now, closing this first phase, the text does something different. It stops describing what goes wrong and names the one thing it says is worth more than all the money in the discussion. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver or gold. Notice the structure, because it is not soft. It does not say, a good name is a lovely thing to have in addition to your wealth. It says, rather than. It is a ranking, 2 things placed on a scale, and one declared heavier, and the heavier one is not the gold. In a book that takes wealth seriously, that treats silver and gold as real and good and worth managing well, the writer stops and says, this other thing outranks all of it. That is a strong claim, and the rest of the verse doubles it. Favor is better than silver or gold. Said twice, 2 ways, in one verse. The writer wanted to be sure it landed. Chapter 22, verse 1. Before we go into why, let me ask you the question this whole episode turns on. And it is a strange question, because most people have never put a number on the thing it asks about. What is your name worth? Not your reputation in the vague sense of whether people like you. Something more specific and more economic than that. Think of it this way. If you needed something tomorrow that required someone to trust you, a loan without full collateral, a job on someone's word, a second chance after a mistake, a deal closed on a handshake because there was no time for contracts, who would say yes? And how many people are on that list? That list is your name, not what you think of yourself, not what strangers think, the specific set of people who would act, at cost to themselves, on the strength of your word, because experience has taught them that your word holds. That is the asset this verse is talking about. And most people have never counted it, never audited it, never once asked what it is worth, or whether it is growing or shrinking. We count our money. We almost never count our name. And this verse says, the uncounted thing is the more valuable of the two. Now, why? Why would a book this serious about wealth rank a good name above it? To understand, you have to see what a name actually was in the ancient economy, because it was not a soft thing, a matter of feeling admired. It was hard infrastructure. There were no credit scores, no background checks, no references pulled from a database, no institutions that could vouch for a stranger. If you wanted to do business with someone, the only information you had about whether they would keep their end was their name, the accumulated record, held in the memory of a community, of whether this person had kept their word before. A good name meant this person pays what they owe, delivers what they promise, tells the truth about the goods, returns what they borrow. A bad name meant the opposite, and it traveled. In a world of villages and repeated dealings, everyone eventually knew whether your name was good. And that record was, quite literally, the thing that let you trade. With a good name, doors opened that money alone could not open. People extended credit to you because your name was the collateral. They did business on your word because your word had held before. They took you at your account of things because your account had proven true. The good name was not a reward for being trustworthy. It was the working capital of trust itself, the thing that made every transaction possible without a contract, a court, or a guarantee. It was infrastructure in the most literal sense, the invisible structure that all the visible business ran on top of. And it had a physical form worth pausing on because it makes the abstract thing concrete. In that world, a person of standing carried a seal, a small engraved stone, often worn on a cord or a ring, pressed into wet clay to mark an agreement, a document, a jar of goods, as genuinely theirs. That impression was their signature before signatures, their name made physical. When a seal was pressed into the clay of a contract, it meant this person stands behind this. And the weight that impression carried came entirely from the name behind it. A seal from someone whose word had always held was worth trusting. The identical mark from someone whose word had failed was worth nothing, or worse. The stone was the same size in both cases. What differed was the name it stood for, which is the whole verse in a single object. The seal was small and the gold it could unlock was large, and the seal outweighed the gold every time, because the seal was the name and the name was the thing that made the gold move at all, which is why favour is named alongside it, and why favour is better than silver or gold. Favour is what a good name earns you in the moment of need, the willingness of others to extend themselves for you, to give you the benefit of the doubt, to open the door before you have proven yourself again. Favour is a kind of stored credit that does not sit in any vault. You build it slowly through a long record of being the kind of person others are glad they trusted, and then it is there when you need it, doing things that silver and gold cannot do. Money can buy a great many things. It cannot buy the moment when someone chooses to trust you because of who you have shown yourself to be. That has to be earned over time, and it cannot be purchased at any price, which is precisely why the verse ranks it above the thing that can. So here is why the ranking holds. Put plainly, gold is powerful but limited. It can buy what is for sale. A good name reaches the things that are not for sale. Trust, the benefit of the doubt, the open door, the second chance, the deal that happens on a word. And in a life, the things that are not for sale turn out to matter more than the things that are. That is the whole ranking, and it is not sentimental. It is a sober assessment of which asset does more. Now the part that has to be said with care, because a careless reading of this verse does real harm, and this channel will not do it. This verse does not say that a good name is always deserved, or that a bad name is always earned. It describes the value of a good name. It does not claim the world distributes names fairly. And we have to be honest that it often does not. Think of a specific person, because the abstract version of this is too easy to nod at and move past. Think of someone who returns to a town after one accusation, true or false, it no longer matters, and finds the accusation arrived before them and will outlive them there. Every door a good name would have opened is closed, not because of what they do now, but because of what a story said about them once. They can keep every faithful step this series has described for years, and the name still will not come back, because the community decided the matter before the evidence was in and has no reason to reopen it. That person did not spend their name, it was taken. And that is not a rare edge case. Reputations are made by communities, and communities are not just. Whole groups of people have been handed damaged names by the accident of where or to whom they were born, by a rumor that outran the truth, by the malice of someone with a louder voice. The wisdom literature elsewhere is alert to this. It speaks of the poor man whose wisdom is despised and whose words go unheard simply because he is poor, of the just man who suffers what the wicked deserve. The corpus knows the ledger of names is not kept fairly. So this verse is a statement about the value of the asset, not a promise that the asset is always fairly assigned. Hold both. A good name is worth more than gold, and the world sometimes withholds a good name from people who have every right to one. Both are true. The verse names the first. Honesty requires us to name the second. And for anyone carrying a name they did not earn, the verse is not an accusation. It is, if anything, an exact measure of how much was stolen when the name was stolen, because the verse itself says how valuable the thing is that was taken from them. There is one more thing worth seeing, and it is the asymmetry that makes the name so precious and so dangerous at once. Gold, if you lose it, can be rebuilt. You can earn again. But a name, once badly broken, is far harder to rebuild than a fortune, because trust does not return at the speed it left. A reputation is built slowly, over years of kept words, and it can be spent in a single afternoon, in one broken promise witnessed by the wrong person. And the rebuilding, if it happens at all, takes far longer than the building did, because everyone who extends trust the second time is extending it against the memory of the first. Gold rebuilds. A name often does not. That asymmetry is exactly why the verse ranks it above the gold, not only because it is worth more, but because it is far harder to replace. Which brings the principle down to the one asset you build entirely in private. Your name is the one form of wealth built entirely in the unwatched hours. That is the line, and it gathers up the whole first phase of this series. Everything we have looked at, the margin, the self-direction, the faithful step, the pause before the hasty decision, was built in the hours where no one is watching, in the small private choices no ledger records. And your name is the sum of all of them, seen from the outside. It is what those unwatched choices look like once they have added up, once a community has watched your pattern long enough to know what your word is worth. You do not build a name by managing your reputation. You build it by being, in the unwatched hours, the person your name will eventually say you are. The name is the visible total of 1,000 invisible decisions, which is why it cannot be faked, and why it is worth more than the gold it outranks. And it is worth seeing how directly each earlier episode feeds into it, because this verse is not a new subject. It is the sum of the previous 9. The person who kept a margin instead of devouring everything built a name as someone whose household is stable, who can be relied on, who will not arrive at your door in crisis every season. The person who refused the hasty shortcut, who kept the faithful step when a faster, dishonest one was available, built a name as someone whose word holds under pressure. The person who did the necessary thing in the unwatched hours, with no one requiring it, built a name as someone who does not need supervising. The person who slowed down the early money instead of squandering it, built a name as someone sound with what they are given. Every single trait this phase examined is a deposit into the same account, and the name is the balance of that account, read by everyone who has watched you long enough to know it. That is why it can stand at the end of the phase and gather all of it, because it was being built, silently, the entire time we were talking about everything else, which is also the quiet warning inside the blessing. If the name is the total of the unwatched hours, then it cannot be repaired by anything done in the watched ones. You cannot fix a name with a good performance in public, because the name was never built in public. It was built in the private pattern, and it can only be rebuilt there, the same slow way, over the same long time. There is no shortcut to a name, which is the last and largest lesson of a phase that has been, from the first episode, about the failure of every shortcut. So here is this week's task, and it closes the first phase properly. It is a name audit. Pick the 3 or 4 people whose trust actually matters to how you make your living. A boss, a client, a business partner, a lender, a colleague whose word vouches for yours. For each one, ask a single honest question. Not, do they like me, but, does this person trust me to do what I say I will do? Is my name, with this specific person, a credit or a debit right now? Do not do this to feel bad. Do it because the name is an asset, and assets should be audited. And this is the one asset the whole first phase of this series has been quietly circling. You have counted your debts, your margin, your unwatched hours. This is the last count, and in some ways the most important one, because it is the total of all the others as seen by the people whose trust you depend on. And if you find a debit, a name that has slipped with someone whose trust you need, that is not a verdict. It is information, and it is the most actionable information there is, because a name, unlike gold, is rebuilt by exactly the small, faithful steps this whole series has been about. Slowly, in the unwatched hours, starting now. For any real situation where trust has been damaged and something important depends on repairing it. The principle this series keeps returning to holds here too. Bring in someone steady who can see the situation more clearly than you can from inside it. A good name, chosen rather than great riches. Favor, better than silver or gold. The verse ranks them and means it. And it is not being sentimental. It is telling you which asset reaches the things that are not for sale. So the question for the comments is this. What is one small thing that quietly builds or spends a name? Something most people never think about, but that a community notices over time. Be specific, because the specific ones are the ones that make someone else suddenly see their own small habits differently. Tell us, we read them. This episode closes the first phase of the series, the phase about the individual and the ordinary ways money goes right and wrong in a single life. If you have been following in order, you have the whole foundation now. Debt and authority, haste and capacity, the margin, the name. That is the ground the rest is built on, and following in order is how it was meant to be watched. Subscribe to keep the sequence. Because the series now turns, and it is the largest turn it will make. For 10 episodes, we have been talking about you, your jar, your name, your unwatched hours, the quiet arithmetic of a single life. Starting next, the record widens. It leaves the household and walks into the accounts of a state. Because everything we have examined in one life happened once, at a scale no individual has ever matched. There was a kingdom that faced every single thing this first phase described: debt and its authority, haste and its cost, the danger of wealth arriving faster than the wisdom to hold it, and faced them not with a household's small sums, but with the largest fortune in the entire story, gold by the ton, fleets, the trade of nations, an administration built to move it all. The first phase asked how a person handles money. The second asks how a kingdom does, and whether the same rules that govern a jar of oil also govern a treasury that took the breath away of everyone who saw it. They do. That is the quiet thesis of everything ahead. The kingdom faces your exact problems, with more zeros in front of them, and further to fall. We are going to walk into that treasury and count what was in it, and follow where it went. And we already know, because the record tells us at the start, how the story ends, with the gold carried out the door and something else put in its place. Everything from here is the account of how the greatest fortune ever assembled in this story was built, run, and lost. That is where we go next.